So we're here in Death Valley to kind of explore what it's like just to visit this place and experience this level of heat. Now, it's important to note this isn't the official temperature Death Valley. It's the temperature it is right here. So we're getting a little additional heat against the wall and cement. Trust me, when you're here and that says 130, it feels like 130. So we just arrived in Badwater, and I kind of want to take you through the stages or waves of how the heat affects you out here. So this is our, let's say, the first stage. In your car, air conditioning, looking out at the heat. Pretty nice right now. Then we have stage 2, which is getting out of the car, where you're immediately hit with how hot it is. However, I would say when you're standing still, you just got out of the car, it's hot, but it's not shocking, it's not oppressive, not yet. So we've left the car, walked down onto the salt flat, and this is where the heat finally really hits you. You realize just how hot it is, you started sweating, and it feels inescapable. And I think that's the way to summarize the heat out here is inescapable. Unless you're able to get to a vehicle that has air conditioning, unless you're able to go into a building with air conditioning.
First of all, my voice got really raspy right away when I walked outside, and you can feel it in your eyes. And usually a breeze is cool. This is not a cool breeze whatsoever.
So I grew up in the desert, and I've worked in some pretty extreme environments in my life. And I can say that this is a different level of heat. We've walked a pretty good distance from the cars now. If it wasn't 120 degrees, I would say we're right next to the cars. But out here in this environment, in this heat, it feels like you could be miles away. Every step you take going away from the cars feels like 2 steps going back, including some of the metal parts like here. One thing I would say is you just don't acclimate. Once it seems like I'm over 110 degrees, I never get used to it. I've been out here for half an hour and it feels as hot now as it did when I stepped out of the car, if not even worse. So this is what I mean by how hot it is. I've got my hood up and my sleeve rolled onto my hand because my entire tripod feels like I'm going to burn myself every time I touch it. So I have to make sure that my skin is not touching my equipment just to avoid being burned. One last thing to note about Death Valley is just because the sun sets doesn't mean it really cools down. I was out till about 12:30 last night and it never dropped below 100 degrees.
It's impressive. It's like a wave that hits you when you get out of the car. But it's a very dry heat, so it's not as in Europe and it gets hot like 35 degrees Celsius, so it's like 95, 100. It's very humid heat, so you're sweating a lot, whereas here it's dry, so it's very different.
Jelajahi cara baru mendapatkan informasi. Download Metro TV Extend sekarang.